The moment he called my strategy report academic fluff in front of 40 executives, I knew Blake Renshaw had just signed his professional death warrant. He stood there, designer suit pristine, that practiced executive smile cutting through the conference room like a blade. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was the sound of everyone calculating their distance from the explosion that would inevitably follow. He just didn't know it yet. In corporate America, the most devastating revenge doesn't come with screaming or drama. It comes with a perfectly timed email and an $84 million contract walking out the door. My name is Harper Lane, and I've spent 12 years climbing the corporate ladder at North Axis Consulting, earning every rung through late nights, flawless execution, and an ability to see 3 moves ahead that most executives only pretend to have. At 38, I'd built myself into something the firm couldn't easily replace: the director of strategic planning who actually understood both the theory and the blood-soaked reality of implementation. The conference room on the 42nd floor had witnessed my presentations dozens of times before, but this Tuesday morning in March felt different from the moment Blake Renshaw strutted in. 2 minutes late, coffee in hand, not even glancing at the materials my team had distributed. Our new vice president of marketing had been with the company exactly 47 days. I'd counted. "So," Blake said, settling into his chair with the kind of theatrical sigh that suggested he was doing us all a favor by being there, "let's see what strategic planning has cooked up for Horizon Dynamics." I stood at the head of the table, remote in hand, watching him flip through our 200-page strategic assessment with the attention span of someone scrolling Instagram. 3 months. That's how long my team had spent dissecting Horizon's market position, analyzing their competition, identifying growth corridors that could add $300 million to their bottom line within 18 months. We'd interviewed 73 stakeholders, run 16 different scenario models. I'd personally rewritten the executive summary 9 times until every word carried its weight in gold. "Harper," Blake interrupted before I could even advance past the title slide, "I'm going to stop you right there." The room crystallized. Janet from finance stopped typing. Marcus, my lead analyst, slowly set down his pen. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Blake stood up, buttoning his jacket Armani. I noticed. Probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I've reviewed this approach, and frankly, it's exactly the kind of academic fluff that's been holding this firm back." He picked up the report, holding it like contaminated evidence. Theoretical frameworks, predictive modeling, risk matrices. Where's the sizzle? Where's the story that makes clients write checks? "The story," I said, keeping my voice steady as a surgeon's hand, "is in the data. Horizon isn't paying us for sizzle. They're paying for strategic advantage." "And that's where you're wrong." Blake's smile could have sold snake oil to pharmacists. "They're paying for confidence, for vision, not for—" He gestured dismissively at my slides. "Glorified spreadsheets dressed up as strategy." The room held 40 executives. Not one made a sound. They all knew what they were witnessing: a public execution, corporate style. Blake was marking his territory, and he'd chosen me as the fire hydrant. "I'll be taking over the Horizon presentation personally," he continued. "Harper, you can support with slide formatting. I'm sure your attention to detail will be useful." Slide formatting, 12 years of relationship building, strategic wins, and flawless execution reduced to making sure his fonts matched. "Of course," I heard myself say, the words smooth as whiskey, betraying nothing of the calculation already spinning through my mind. "Whatever's best for the client." Blake's expression flickered disappointment maybe, that I hadn't pushed back, hadn't given him the confrontation he'd choreographed. Amateur. He thought he'd won because I didn't fight. He couldn't see that I'd already started setting the board for a different game entirely. "Excellent. Meeting adjourned." He strode out, leaving my report on the table like garbage. The room emptied in awkward trickles. Janet squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Marcus looked ready to quit on the spot, but I caught his eye, gave him the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. When the room finally emptied, I picked up my abandoned report, ran my finger along its spine. 3 months of work dismissed in 3 minutes. But Blake had made a crucial error, the kind that only arrogance produces. He'd assumed that because I'd built the relationships with Horizon Dynamics, he could simply commandeer them. He didn't understand that in this business. Trust isn't transferred, it's earned or burned. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a contact I hadn't messaged in months. Evelyn Ward, CEO of Horizon Dynamics, a woman who'd eaten bigger egos than Blake's for breakfast and still had room for lunch. But I didn't type anything, not yet. Revenge, like good strategy, requires patience. Blake wanted to play corporate politics fine, but he'd just enrolled himself in a masterclass, and tuition would be everything he thought he'd gained. I gathered my materials, straightened my blazer, and walked out of that conference room with my head high. Let Blake think he'd won this round. Let him get comfortable. The most satisfying victories are the ones your opponent never sees coming. After all, he'd just given me permission to handle the slides. He had no idea how much damage the person controlling the presentation could do. 5 years ago, before Blake Renshaw even knew North Axis existed, I was sitting in a different conference room, Horizon Dynamics headquarters, 53rd floor, overlooking the Seattle waterfront. I was 33, newly promoted to senior strategy manager, and about to meet the woman who would become both my mentor and my most powerful professional asset. Evelyn Ward didn't enter rooms. She arrived in them. That day, she wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Her silver hair pulled back in a way that made her look like she could buy and sell companies before her morning coffee. Which, to be fair, she often did. "You're Harper Lane," she said, not a question. "The one who caught the Goldman error." I had a $30 million discrepancy in Goldman's valuation model for Horizon's potential acquisition. Everyone else had missed it. I'd found it at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, running my third verification because something felt wrong. "Details matter," I said simply. "No," Evelyn corrected, sitting down across from me. "Details are everything. The difference between good and great isn't vision any MBA with a PowerPoint can claim vision. It's the ability to see which details will kill you and which will save you." That meeting was supposed to last 30 minutes. It went for 3 hours. By the end, Evelyn had dissected every assumption in my strategic proposal, challenged every projection, and somehow made me grateful for the interrogation. She didn't just want answers. She wanted to understand how I thought, how I built logical frameworks, how I stress-tested my own ideas. "Most consultants," she said as we wrapped up, "tell me what they think I want to hear. You just told me 3 ways my company could fail in the next 18 months. That's worth more than optimism." The relationship that followed wasn't friendship. Evelyn didn't do friendship with vendors. It was something more valuable, mutual professional respect. She became my sounding board for complex problems, not through official meetings, but through quick calls that started with hypothetically speaking and ended with insights that shaped million-dollar strategies. I learned her language, not just business speak, but her specific dialect, the way she valued brutal honesty over diplomatic dancing, how she could smell bullshit through a conference call. Her intolerance for what she called PowerPoint theater. When she said interesting, she meant worthless. When she said fine, someone was about to be fired. And when she said, "Let me think about it," she'd already decided, but wanted to see who would panic. Once likewise, during a particularly tense negotiation with a competitor trying to poach Horizon's talent, she taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. We were on a call, and the other firm's CEO was throwing around big promises, bigger numbers, the kind of theatrical performance that impresses people who mistake volume for value. Evelyn muted her line, turned to me, and said, "Watch this." She unmuted and spoke 6 words, "Send me that in writing." The CEO stumbled, backtracked, suddenly needed to review with his board. The call ended 5 minutes later. "Empty promises evaporate when you ask for documentation," she told me. "Remember that. The distance between what people say and what they'll sign their name to, that's where truth lives." Over the years, I brought Horizon 3 successful strategic pivots, each one adding 9 figures to their valuation. But more importantly, I never wasted Evelyn's time, never presented her with half-baked ideas or strategies that looked good on paper, but would crumble in execution. I earned something more valuable than contracts. I earned credibility. The last time we'd spoken face-to-face, 2 months before Blake's arrival, Evelyn had made an observation that now felt prophetic. "Your firm is changing, Harper. New leadership always means new stupidity. When the politics get too thick, when they start valuing performance over performance, she meant theatrics versus results. Remember, you have options. I'd smiled, assured her North Axis was still the same firm that had earned Horizon's business. Every firm is, she'd replied, until it isn't. Now, sitting in my office, staring at Blake's email outlining his vision for the Horizon presentation, complete with animated transitions and what he called momentum messaging, I thought about that conversation. Evelyn had seen what I'd been too loyal to notice. The firm was changing. Blake was just a symptom of a larger disease. But diseases could be useful, if properly directed. Blake wanted to present to Evelyn Ward fine. Let him walk into that room with his sizzle and his story. Evelyn would eat him alive, slowly, while maintaining perfect eye contact. The only question was whether I wanted to watch it happen or help orchestrate it. I picked up my phone again, looking at Evelyn's contact. Still, I didn't type. The first rule of strategic warfare: never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Blake was making several, but the biggest was assuming that the client relationship he'd stolen from me was actually mine to lose. It wasn't. It was Evelyn's, and she didn't suffer fools, no matter how expensive their suits. Blake's vision arrived in my inbox at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, 36 hours before the Horizon presentation. I'd been expecting garbage, but this was a masterclass in corporate emptiness, 60 slides of gradient backgrounds, stock photos of people pointing at charts, and buzzwords arranged like magnetic poetry written by someone having a stroke. Synergistic growth acceleration, paradigm-shifting market penetration, holistic revenue optimization through dynamic stakeholder engagement. I actually laughed, out loud, alone in my office. The data, if you could call it that, was even worse. Revenue projections that assumed 30% year-over-year growth with no substantiation. Market analysis that looked like he'd Googled Technology Trends 2024 and copy-pasted the first 3 results. A competitive landscape slide that didn't include 2 of Horizon's biggest threats, companies Evelyn had specifically mentioned in our last quarterly review. My phone buzzed. Marcus, texting from his apartment. Have you seen this shit? It's like ChatGPT had a seizure. Stand down, I replied. Let it play out. But I wasn't going to let it play out blind. I opened a new presentation. The real one. The one my team had built over 3 months. Every slide backed by verified data. Every projection stress-tested against 3 different economic scenarios. Every recommendation tied to specific, measurable outcomes. This was the work Blake had called academic fluff. I saved it to my personal drive, then opened Blake's presentation again. He wanted me to format his slides. Fine. I'd format them. I'd make them beautiful. Perfect fonts. Flawless transitions. Corporate-approved color schemes. The presentation would look like $1 million and say absolutely nothing. But first, there was a more delicate move to make. I pulled up my phone, finally typing the message I'd been crafting in my head for days. Evelyn, quick heads up. The Horizon deck has been reassigned to new leadership. I wasn't allowed to vet the final content. You know I don't usually caveat my work. But I wanted you to know this isn't coming through my standard quality control. See you Saturday. H. Professional. Factual. Just enough information to let her know something was off without looking like I was sabotaging my own company. I hit send at 11:47 p.m., late enough to seem like I'd been struggling with whether to send it at all. Her response came in 12 minutes, noted. Interesting timing for North Axis to experiment with new approaches. Interesting. In Evelyn's vocabulary, that meant worthless. Friday morning, Blake called a prep meeting. He strutted into the conference room wearing a new suit, Tom Ford this time, navy with subtle pinstripes that screamed, "I just got a raise." Harper, did you polish the deck? I slid the formatted presentation across the table. Formatted to North Axis brand standards. Every transition, every animation, exactly as you specified. He flipped through it on his laptop, nodding appreciatively at the visual polish while completely missing that I hadn't changed a single word of his vapid content. Perfect. This is exactly the kind of professional package Horizon expects. Janet from finance caught my eye, her expression carefully neutral. She'd seen the original strategy. She knew what we were about to walk into a massacre with. One question, I said, pulling up slide 37. This revenue projection assumes Horizon can capture 40% of the emerging Asian market. Do we have supporting data for that? Blake waved dismissively. It's aspirational. Clients want to see ambition. Evelyn Ward specifically requires all projections to be backed by verifiable data points. Well, Evelyn Ward hasn't seen my style of presentation yet. He closed his laptop with the confidence of someone who'd never been professionally eviscerated. She'll appreciate a fresh perspective. I nodded, making a note in my portfolio, not for any real purpose, just to have something to do with my hands besides applaud his march toward career suicide. The meeting's at 2 p.m. tomorrow, Blake continued. I'll lead, obviously. Harper, you'll run the slides and handle any technical questions. Try to keep the answers brief. We don't want to get bogged down in details. Details. The exact thing Evelyn valued above everything else. Of course, I said, brief and high level. After the meeting, Marcus cornered me by the elevator. You're really going to let him walk into Evelyn Ward's office with that deck? I'm going to do exactly what I've been asked to do, I replied. Support the presentation and run the slides. Harper, this could blow back on all of us. I looked at him directly. Marcus, do you trust me? He hesitated, then nodded. Then trust me now, and update your resume, quietly. His eyes widened slightly, but he was smart enough not to ask questions. That evening, I stayed late, reviewing Blake's presentation one more time. Not to fix it, it was beyond fixing, but to memorize every flaw, every unsupported claim, every piece of nonsense disguised as strategy. When Evelyn started asking questions, I needed to know exactly where each body was buried. At 11 p.m., I got one more text from Evelyn. Bringing my full board tomorrow. They're eager to see North Axis's new direction. The full board, 8 people who collectively controlled about $3 billion in assets. Blake thought he was presenting to one person. He was about to perform his amateur hour in front of an entire investment committee. I shut down my computer, gathered my things, and headed home. Tomorrow. Blake would learn what happened when you mistake silence for submission, when you confused formatting slides with controlling the narrative. He'd stolen the spotlight. Now he could burn under it. The Horizon Dynamics boardroom was a study in controlled intimidation, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, a table that could seat 20 but held only 9, and a silence so complete you could hear the Keurig brewing 3 rooms away. The temperature was exactly 68 degrees, Evelyn's preferred setting for keeping people slightly uncomfortable and therefore alert. Blake didn't notice any of this. He was too busy arranging his materials, adjusting his tie, practicing his opening smile in the black reflection of his laptop screen. I sat in the corner, invisible in my deliberate choice of neutral gray, laptop connected to the presentation system, watching him miss every environmental cue that screamed danger. Evelyn entered at 2 p.m. exactly, followed by 8 board members whose collective net worth could have bought a small country. She didn't introduce them. If you didn't know who they were, you didn't belong in the room. Blake, she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Not Mr. Renshaw. Not, good to see you. Just Blake. The way you might acknowledge a piece of furniture. Ms. Ward, board members, thank you for this opportunity. Blake launched into his opening, the one he'd practiced in the mirror that morning. Today, we're going to show you not just growth, but transformation. Not just evolution, but revolution. I clicked to the first slide. Synergistic growth acceleration blazed across the screen in 48-point font. David Kim, Horizon's CFO, shifted slightly in his chair. That was his tell-the-shoulder adjustment that meant he'd already started calculating how much time was being wasted. Blake continued, oblivious. Our analysis shows Horizon is perfectly positioned to capture 40% of the emerging Asian market within 18 months. Based on what data? The question came from Margaret Cho, head of the investment committee, known for dismantling J.P. Morgan's entire Asia-Pacific strategy in a single meeting. Blake smiled his television smile. Based on market trending and consumer behavior patterns that indicate, I asked for data, not interpretation. I watched Blake's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. Harper, could you advance to slide 23? I clicked through. The slide showed a pie chart with no sources, no methodology, just colorful segments labeled with percentages that totaled 107%. The room's silence deepened. Richard Steinberg, the board's senior member, slowly removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on, and leaned forward. "Young man, are you seriously presenting a chart that exceeds 100% what? That represents market overlap potential. It represents either incompetence or fraud. Which would you prefer we assume?" Blake's face flushed. He tried to recover, jumping to his paradigm-shifting market penetration section, but it was like watching someone try to extinguish a fire with gasoline. Every slide made it worse. Every buzzword dug the hole deeper. 30 minutes in, Evelyn raised her hand. Just slightly, barely a gesture, but Blake stopped mid-sentence. "Harper," she said, not looking at me, "do you have the original strategic analysis? The one your team spent 3 months developing?" Blake's head snapped toward me. "That's not we decided to go in a different direction." "I didn't ask you." Evelyn's voice could have frozen mercury. "Harper." "I have it," I said quietly. "Would you like me to present it?" "No," she stood. "This meeting is over." The board filed out without a word. Blake stood there, mouth slightly open, like a fish suddenly discovering air wasn't water. Evelyn paused at the door. "Harper, a word." I followed her to a smaller conference room, leaving Blake alone with his revolutionary paradigm shifts. "The original deck," she said simply. "Send it to me, directly." "Of course." That was quite a performance. I just ran the slides. She almost smiled. Almost. "Yes, I noticed. You ran them perfectly. Every disastrous transition, every embarrassing chart, presented with absolutely professional precision." She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. "I'm curious, when did North Axis decide that Blake Renshaw was qualified to handle a multi-billion-dollar strategic account?" "About a week ago." "And you didn't fight it?" "I was told my role was to support and format." "So you did." She put her phone away. "Lunch tomorrow, Rainier Club, 1 o'clock, come alone." It wasn't a request. I returned to find Blake packing up, his movements sharp and agitated. "What the hell was that?" "That was your presentation. You sabotaged me. You could have warned me about the chart error. You told me to keep my answers brief, to not get bogged down in details." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was menacing. "You think you're clever. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you deliberately." "Knows what that?" "I formatted your slides exactly as requested, that I presented your vision without alteration, that I followed your direct instructions to the letter." My phone buzzed, a text from Evelyn, sent to both Blake and me. "After today's presentation, Horizon Dynamics will be reviewing our relationship with North Axis. We'll communicate our decision Monday morning." Blake's face went from red to white in about 3 seconds. He grabbed his laptop and left without another word. I stayed behind, slowly packing my things, looking out at Elliott Bay. The water was calm, but underneath, the currents were already changing direction. Blake thought this was about one bad presentation. He had no idea he'd just starred in his own execution. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, heard Blake looked like he'd seen a ghost leaving Horizon. What happened?" He gave the exact presentation he wanted to give. And Evelyn Ward has a full board meeting Monday morning. I didn't need to spell it out. An $84 million contract was about to evaporate, and Blake's fingerprints were all over the murder weapon. The Rainier Club occupied the kind of old-money Seattle real estate that tech millionaires couldn't buy their way into with stock options. Evelyn had a corner table on the 3rd floor, overlooking the city where she'd built her empire one strategic acquisition at a time. She was already seated when I arrived, drinking black coffee from China that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. No small talk, no pleasantries. That wasn't Evelyn's style. "Your firm is about to lose $84 million, she said, as casually as discussing the weather. "I know. Monday morning, I'm pulling the contract, complete termination, no wind-down period." I nodded, sipping water that tasted somehow more expensive than regular water. "The question," she continued, "is what happens next, to you, specifically." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, a single page, an offer letter. Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, Horizon Dynamics. The number at the bottom had enough zeros to make my poker face crack slightly. That's 3 times what North Axis pays you, she said. Plus equity, plus a signing bonus that should cover any inconvenience from leaving your current position. Evelyn. I'm not finished. She pulled out a second document. I want you to bring your team, the real talent, Marcus Chen, Sarah Martinez, Janet Eng. If she'll leave finance, I've had my people pull their profiles. They're undervalued, underutilized, and wasted at North Axis. You're asking me to gut my own company. I'm asking you to save the people worth saving from a sinking ship. Blake Renshaw isn't an anomaly. Harper, he's a symptom. Your CEO hired him, promoted him, gave him your biggest account after 47 days. What does that tell you about where North Axis is heading? She was right. I'd known it for months but hadn't wanted to admit it. The firm that had trained me, that had been built on analytical rigor and strategic excellence, was transforming into something that valued performance over performance, style over substance. When? I asked. 2 weeks. Enough time to be professional, not enough for them to mount a counteroffensive. And if they try to enforce non-competes, Evelyn's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Let them try. My legal team hasn't lost a case in 6 years, and they're bored. I looked at the offer again. It wasn't just the money, though. The money was staggering. It was the title, the scope, the chance to build something without Blake Renshaw's treating strategy like a marketing exercise. There's one condition, I said. Her eyebrow raised slightly, the Evelyn Ward equivalent of surprise. I want Marcus to get senior director, not just director. Sarah gets full relocation package if she wants to move from Portland, and Janet gets to build her own financial analysis team, not just join an existing one. You're negotiating for other people's contracts. I'm ensuring the people who follow me know I've got their backs. She studied me for a long moment. Done. HR will have updated offers Monday afternoon. After you terminate the North Axis contract, naturally, the termination notice goes out at 9 a.m. I imagine your CEO will call an emergency meeting by 9:15. We ate lunch salmon that melted on the tongue. Vegetables I couldn't pronounce. Wine I definitely couldn't afford. Evelyn told me about Horizon's 5-year plan, the acquisitions she was considering, the strategic pivots that would need someone who understood both the mathematics and the human elements of change. Blake did me a favor, she said over dessert. I've been trying to poach you for 2 years. He just made it easy. You could have made an offer any time. While you were still loyal to North Axis, you'd have turned me down. You're irritatingly principled that way. But now they've shown you who they really are. Loyalty to an institution that doesn't value you isn't loyalty, it's Stockholm Syndrome. That evening, I called Marcus and Sarah separately. Didn't mention specifics over the phone, just suggested they might want to ensure their personal laptops were updated with any personal files, that their contact lists were backed up, that their resumes were current. Hypothetically, Marcus said, if someone were to offer me a significant career opportunity, should I be ready to move quickly? Hypothetically, you should be ready by Monday afternoon. Understood. Sunday night, I drafted my resignation letter, 2 sentences, professional, clean, no bridges burned, but no warmth either. I scheduled it to send Monday at 11 a.m., exactly 2 hours after Evelyn's contract termination would hit. Then I went through my office files, removing personal items, copying nothing proprietary, but ensuring I had records of every successful strategy I'd developed, every client relationship I'd built, every accomplishment that belonged to me, not to North Axis. Blake had accused me of sabotage. He was wrong. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped protecting him from himself. But what came next? That wasn't sabotage either. It was a hostile takeover, executed with surgical precision. My phone buzzed. Evelyn, termination letter drafted. General counsel signed off. Reason cited. Fundamental misalignment of strategic vision and failure to meet minimum professional standards. Failure to meet minimum professional standards. In corporate speak, that was the equivalent of professional murder. No firm would touch Blake after that. I poured myself a glass of wine, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Tomorrow, North Axis would lose their biggest client. By tomorrow afternoon, they'd lose their best strategic team. And Blake Renshaw would learn that in corporate America, the fall was always proportional to the arrogance of the climb. He'd wanted the spotlight. Tomorrow, he'd discover it was actually a targeting laser. Monday morning arrived with the kind of pristine Seattle weather that felt like the universe had a sense of irony. I walked into North Axis at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Evelyn's termination letter would detonate in our CEO's inbox. The office hummed with its usual Monday energy, coffee brewing, keyboards clacking, people complaining about weekend emails. Blake walked past my office at 8:52 whistling. Actually whistling. He'd probably spent the weekend planning how to spin Friday's disaster into someone else's fault. 7 minutes until he learned that some disasters don't get spin. At 9:00 a.m. exactly, I watched our CEO, Richard Paulson, through his glass office walls as he opened his email. His face went through a fascinating evolution: confusion, disbelief, then a shade of red I'd previously only seen on lobsters. By 9:06, every senior director and above had been summoned to the main conference room. By 9:08, Blake was practically running down the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, leaving what I assumed was his fourth voicemail for Evelyn. I took my time walking to the conference room, arriving exactly at 9:15. The scene inside was corporate chaos. Richard stood at the head of the table, the termination letter projected on the screen behind him like evidence at a trial. $84 million, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Our largest client, 23% of our revenue, gone. Blake started to speak. Richard, there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Richard cut him off, was mine when I let you anywhere near this account. Harper was supposed to support. Harper. Richard turned to me. Harper built this relationship over 5 years. You destroyed it in 30 minutes. I remained silent, keeping my expression carefully neutral. No need to add fuel to a fire that was already consuming everything in its path. I want a full audit, Richard continued. Every email, every document, every decision that led to this catastrophe. He looked directly at Blake. You're suspended. Effective immediately. Clear your office. Blake's mouth opened and closed several times. You can't, I have a contract, which includes a clause about gross negligence resulting in client loss. Legal will be in touch. The meeting continued for another hour. Crisis management at its most desperate. Could we save the relationship? No. Could we negotiate a gradual termination? Already tried. Evelyn's assistant had declined to even schedule a call. Could we legally challenge the termination? Not without looking even more pathetic. At 10:45, I excused myself, returned to my office, and hit send on my resignation email. By 11:02, Richard was at my door. You're leaving, not a question. 2 weeks' notice, as per my contract. Horizon poached you. Horizon made an offer. I accepted. He sat down heavily in my guest chair. Who else? I didn't answer. He'd find out soon enough when Marcus, Sarah, and Janet submitted their resignations that afternoon. This is because of Blake. This is because North Axis changed. Blake was just the proof. Richard looked older suddenly, tired. We needed fresh perspective. You got it. How's it working out? He left without another word. By noon, the news had spread through the office like wildfire. The Horizon contract, gone. Blake, suspended. Harper, leaving. The stock price would take a hit by market close. Marcus stopped by at 12:30. Submitted. 2 weeks. Sarah texted at 12:45. Done that, they didn't even try to counter. Janet at 1:15. Richard actually asked if this was coordinated. I told him good talent tends to recognize opportunity simultaneously. By 2 p.m., I was packing my office when Blake appeared in my doorway. His suspension apparently didn't start immediately, or security was slower than usual. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect hair slightly disheveled. You planned this, he said. I planned nothing. You presented your vision. The client made a decision. The market responded. You could have saved it, could have stepped in, fixed the presentation. That wasn't my job. My job was to format slides, remember. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The same thing you tried to cost me, career trajectory.